Can you explain this?
It's not what you think.
It looks pretty clear to me.
Please, let me explain.
Ben thought he had it all figured out. For months, he had been secretly seeing Emma, his girlfriend, behind his wife Sarah's back. He felt like he was living two lives, and Emma made him feel more alive than his marriage ever did. He convinced himself that it was harmless, just a little escape from his boring routine. He didn't think it would ever come back to bite him. One day, a big business event came up. Ben was excited because this would be the perfect opportunity to show off his relationship with Emma. He thought it was just another event, nothing unusual. He told Sarah he was going for a business trip, but instead, he took Emma to the event, hoping to impress her and have a good time. But what Ben didn't know was that Sarah was no longer just his wife. She had recently been promoted to CEO of the company hosting the event, a secret she had kept from him. She had worked hard for years, climbing the corporate ladder, and had earned the position. She had planned everything, from the speeches to the guest list. When Ben and Emma walked into the event, Sarah was standing at the podium, addressing the crowd. Ben's heart sank. He never expected this. He had no idea his wife had reached such a high position. The guilt hit him hard, but he tried to keep his composure, even though his world had just shifted. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a much bigger surprise. Ben had been feeling disconnected from Sarah for months. Their marriage had become more like a routine, and he found himself longing for something more exciting, more spontaneous. That's when he met Emma. She was everything Sarah wasn't: young, carefree, and full of energy. Emma made Ben feel like he was alive again, like he was in control of his own happiness. At first, it was innocent. They started seeing each other during business trips, then sneaking around during weekends. Ben told himself it was just a fling, a way to escape the monotony of his marriage. He convinced himself that he wasn't really doing anything wrong, just having fun and keeping it private. Emma was everything he wanted at that moment. She didn't have the responsibilities that came with a family. She didn't need him to be anything more than someone who could enjoy life with her. They would go on spontaneous trips, stay up all night talking about dreams and desires, things that Ben had stopped doing with Sarah a long time ago. Ben was swept up in the excitement of this new relationship, thinking it was the answer to his unhappiness. He kept telling himself that he would sort things out with Sarah when the time was right. But the more he spent time with Emma, the more he started to believe that this was the life he deserved. He started imagining a future with her, one without the weight of responsibility, one where he could be free. Little did he know, his new relationship would soon cause him more trouble than he ever anticipated. The decision to sneak around would soon come back to haunt him in the worst possible way. Ben's secret life was becoming harder to maintain. Each day, he had to balance his two worlds, one with Sarah, the wife he had grown distant from, and one with Emma, the woman who made him feel young and alive again. At first, it felt thrilling to keep his affair hidden, but soon it started to weigh on him. The lies were piling up, and he was constantly worried about being found out. To keep up appearances, Ben would go on business trips, telling Sarah that he had work to do. During these trips, he would meet up with Emma, pretending that everything was normal. It was a dangerous game he was playing, but he couldn't help himself. Every time he saw Emma, he was reminded of what he was missing in his marriage with Sarah: the excitement, the passion, the sense of freedom. However, the guilt started to eat at him. He began to feel like he was lying to everyone, including himself. He had promised Sarah that they would work on their relationship, but he was neglecting her for the excitement of a secret affair. Ben wasn't sure how long he could keep it up, but he told himself that it would all be worth it in the end. He could figure things out with Sarah later. But as the months passed, Ben realized he was growing more attached to Emma. She made him feel special in a way that Sarah didn't anymore. He was starting to believe that he had made the right choice by getting involved with her. What he didn't realize was that his secrets were slowly starting to unravel, and the consequences were going to be far worse than he imagined. The day of the business event finally arrived. Ben had been looking forward to it, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to show off Emma. He had everything planned out: a fancy dinner, mingling with influential people, and spending quality time with her away from Sarah. He hadn't even thought twice about the event or what it meant until they arrived. As Ben and Emma walked into the grand ballroom, everything felt just as he had imagined. The excitement was palpable, and Ben was proud to have Emma by his side. But as they made their way through the crowd, something caught his attention. He noticed a familiar face standing at the podium, speaking to the crowd with ease and authority. It was Sarah. Ben stood frozen. His heart dropped as he realized that Sarah was no longer the quiet, reserved wife he had known for years. She was the CEO of the company hosting the event. Ben had no idea. In fact, he hadn't even known about her promotion. She had kept it a secret, busy with her own work and responsibilities, all while Ben was living his double life. For a moment, Ben stood there, watching Sarah from a distance, completely stunned. How had she kept this from him? How had he not known that she had been working her way up in the company? The reality of the situation hit him hard. His wife wasn't just someone he could ignore anymore. She was in control, and he was the one who was out of the loop. Ben didn't know how to react. The guilt weighed on him even more heavily now that he realized the true gravity of his situation. Ben could barely focus on anything after realizing that Sarah was the CEO. He and Emma tried to mingle, but it felt like everything was happening in slow motion. Every time Ben looked around the room, he could feel Sarah's eyes on him, even though she wasn't acknowledging him directly. It was like she was silently watching everything unfold. The more Ben tried to ignore the situation, the more he realized how wrong everything felt. The guilt was overwhelming, and he could no longer enjoy the evening as he had planned. Sarah was in control of the event, and Ben felt like a spectator in his own life. He had always been the one to take charge, the one who had been keeping up the appearance of a perfect family. But now, Sarah was standing at the helm of everything, effortlessly taking the lead. Emma, unaware of the full scope of the situation, continued to chat with people and enjoy herself. She was oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that Ben was feeling. Ben, on the other hand, was hyper-aware of every little detail. He kept telling himself that everything would be fine, but deep down, he knew that the consequences of his actions were beginning to catch up with him. As the night went on, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that he was living a lie. Sarah had not only built a career for herself, but had also been silently taking control of their life together. And now, Ben felt like a stranger in his own marriage. The sense of pride he had once had for his family was gone, replaced by shame and regret. This event had turned into a nightmare, and he didn't know how to escape. As the night continued, Ben couldn't ignore the tension in the air. His mind raced with thoughts of how he would explain everything to Sarah. But as the event drew to a close, Sarah finally approached him. She didn't seem angry or upset. She remained calm, composed as always. But Ben could sense the underlying strength in her demeanor. She wasn't the woman he had once known. This was someone entirely different. She pulled Ben aside, away from the crowd, where they could talk privately. The look on Sarah's face told him everything. She already knew. She had known for a while. There was no accusation in her eyes, no outburst. She simply asked him about the woman standing beside him all night. "Who is she, Ben?" Sarah asked quietly. Ben's heart pounded in his chest. He was caught. He had spent months lying, sneaking around, and pretending that everything was fine. Now, in the face of his wife, the woman who had been the backbone of his life, he had no words. He stumbled, trying to come up with something, anything, to explain himself. But nothing seemed right. Sarah didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just listened to his lame excuses, her face unreadable. When he finally stopped speaking, she looked at him for a long time, her eyes piercing through him. There was no anger, no outburst, just a quiet realization. She had seen through the lies for far too long, and now she was done playing the fool. "I know everything, Ben," Sarah said softly. "And I've been watching, waiting for you to come clean. But I guess I was wrong." Ben's world shattered in that moment. Sarah had known everything, and she was done pretending. The words Sarah spoke to Ben lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Ben stood there, speechless, unsure of what to say next. He had never seen Sarah like this before. She was calm, collected, but there was something about her composure that unnerved him. It wasn't the anger he expected, but something much more powerful: control. Sarah had always been the quiet, supportive partner, taking care of their home and their family while Ben focused on his career. But now, she was the CEO of the company he had worked for, the one he had taken for granted. And it wasn't just her career that had changed. She had changed too. The woman who had once been content to stand in the background was now someone who no longer needed to apologize for her ambition or success. "I've known for months, Ben," Sarah said, her voice steady, but with an edge. "I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't ready to confront you until I had all the facts. And now I do." Her words hit Ben like a slap in the face. He had been living in denial, thinking that he could juggle both women without facing any real consequences. But Sarah wasn't the naive woman he once knew. She had seen through him, and she had been quietly planning her next move. "I'm not angry," Sarah continued. "I'm disappointed. But more than that, I'm done. Done with the lies. Done with the secrets." Ben felt a wave of guilt rush over him. Sarah's calmness, her quiet strength, made him feel smaller than ever. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't screaming. She was just done with him, and that realization hit harder than any confrontation could. That night, after the confrontation, Ben returned home, hoping for some kind of reconciliation. He thought that Sarah would eventually forgive him, that he could somehow convince her that his affair with Emma didn't mean anything. But as he walked through the front door, he was met with the cold reality that things had changed. Sarah was sitting in the living room, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't look upset or angry anymore. She was calm, composed, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Ben hadn't seen before. It was a look of finality. "Ben," she said softly, her voice steady but full of hurt, "I've been carrying the weight of this relationship for years. I've supported you. I've sacrificed so much for us, and you've been living a lie." Ben tried to speak, but Sarah held up a hand, stopping him. "I've watched you become someone I don't even recognize. You've made your choices, and now I have to make mine. I won't let you tear me down anymore." For the first time, Ben saw how much Sarah had been hiding. She had quietly endured his neglect, his lies, and his affair, all while keeping their family together. She had kept her strength, even when Ben was too busy with his own selfish desires to notice. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Ben," Sarah continued, her voice growing firmer. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman I was when I married you. I've grown. I've found my own worth, and I'm not going to let you drag me down anymore." The finality in her tone made Ben realize that he had lost everything. His actions had irreparably damaged the most important relationship in his life. After their emotional conversation, Sarah didn't waste any time. Ben was left reeling from the realization that he had lost her, but Sarah was just beginning to make her move. The woman who had once quietly supported him, sacrificing so much for their family, had now become someone entirely different, a woman who no longer needed to ask for anything because she had everything she needed: control. Sarah didn't want the typical revenge. She didn't want to lash out in anger or cause a scene. Instead, she had a different kind of plan. She was going to take everything Ben had built and make sure he lost it all, without ever having to raise her voice or make a scene. She started by ensuring that Ben's role at the company would be drastically reduced. As CEO, she had the power to make decisions, and she wasted no time in quietly sidelining him. She moved quickly, taking Ben off critical projects and making sure he no longer had the influence he once did. It was a silent but deadly blow to his career, and he had no idea it was coming. Sarah also made sure to build a stronger, more successful future for herself. She took the company to new heights, making sure everyone knew that she was the one in charge. Her quiet revenge was all about control, about showing Ben that she didn't need him to succeed. She could thrive on her own, and she would. Ben, meanwhile, was left with nothing. His career was faltering, his marriage was over, and Emma, who he thought was his escape, was slowly realizing that he wasn't the man she thought he was. Sarah's calm, calculated moves had stripped Ben of everything, and it was clear that he had no one to blame but himself. In the end, Ben lost everything. His career, once thriving under his influence and position, crumbled under Sarah's careful management. As CEO, she had the power to push him aside, and that's exactly what she did. His days at the company were numbered, and Ben found himself struggling to regain the position and respect he once took for granted. Emma, the woman he had once hoped would be his new life, quickly grew disillusioned with him. She had believed in the excitement and thrill of their relationship, but now she saw the man he truly was, a man who had betrayed his wife, his family, and himself. Emma began distancing herself from Ben, realizing that he was no longer the confident, successful man she had fallen for. She didn't want to be with someone who had so little control over his life. Meanwhile, Sarah's rise continued. As she took the company to new heights, she earned the respect and admiration of everyone around her. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And the more successful Sarah became, the more Ben faded into the background. The world had shifted, and he had become a mere shadow of the man he once was. Ben's life, once full of promise and potential, had spiraled downward. His relationship with Sarah was over, his career was falling apart, and Emma was gone. His affair had cost him everything, and now he was left to reflect on his choices. He had chased excitement and new beginnings, but in the process, he had lost the one thing that truly mattered, everything he had built with Sarah. It was a painful reminder that betrayal and selfishness always have consequences, and for Ben, those consequences were irreversible.